Welcome to Revenge and Karma episodes. The suitcase was already by the door when I came downstairs. I almost walked right past it. That's the part that still gets me, even now. I almost stepped around my own life, packed into one bag, and left in my hallway like something headed for donation. It was the hard-sided black one, 24 inches, standing upright in the middle of my floor like it had every right to be there. I stopped on the third step from the bottom. My wife was at my kitchen counter with her back to me, already dressed, hair done, blazer on, travel mug sealed beside her. Everything about her was already finished and ready to go. She didn't turn around. She just said it, flat and clean. No anger, no hesitation. "That bag is yours, Alan." 3 words, delivered like a label on a box. Then she picked up her keys. I'd walked past me without touching me, opened my front door, and left. I stood there listening to my wife's car disappear down my street. My wife had turned around before she left. Her face had nothing in it. Not sadness, not guilt, not 31 years of anything at all. Just the flat, organized expression of a woman completing a task she had already checked off in her head days ago. "You've become useless to this family," my wife said. "I'm done pretending you're not." Then my wife walked out of my house, and out of my life. I want you to stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story most people don't believe until they see the documents. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And I want to know this story is reaching people who understand what it means to be written off by someone who was supposed to know better. Now, let me tell you exactly how I got here. My name is Alan Mercer. I'm 62 years old. For 28 years, I worked as a structural engineer. Bridges, schools, hospital wings. I was not a wealthy man, but I was a steady one. I lost my job at 59 when my firm restructured. I spent 11 months looking for work, while my wife's patience ran out 1 week at a time. I heard my wife tell her sister through my kitchen wall that she was done carrying a man who couldn't carry himself. I blamed myself for all of it. I thought my wife's coldness was fear about money. I was wrong about that. About everything, as it turned out. And I called my oldest friend Pete from my driveway before I even started the car. Pete had been my friend since college, the kind of friend who doesn't ask questions because he already understands the ones that matter. I told him I needed his spare room. He said, "Come now." I put my suitcase in my trunk and drove to his house on Meadowbrook Lane. That first night I sat on the edge of Pete's guest bed and stared at the floor. I kept thinking about the stone path to my front door I had laid myself in 2004. 67 stones, every one leveled by hand. The maple tree I planted in 2003 from a $10 sapling brought home in my back seat because I wanted it waiting for my wife when she got home from work that evening. The coat hooks I installed in 2009 because my wife kept dropping her coat on the bench. 21 years of my weekends building a home I had just been told to leave. I didn't know yet that another man's keys were already sitting in my mother's ceramic dish by my front door. But I was about to find out. And when I did, everything I thought I understood about my own marriage came apart. 8 months after Pete's spare room became my address, a certified letter arrived. Pete signed for it while I was out walking my usual 3 miles. He left it on his kitchen table with a coffee mug set beside it. His quiet way of saying this one matters. The return address was a law firm in Charleston, South Carolina. Gerald Howell, estate attorney. My uncle, my father's younger brother Stuart, had passed away at 79. Peaceful. At home. A quiet man who had spent 40 years buying small parcels of coastal land carefully, patiently. Always thinking about what something would be worth in 20 years, not today. The letter said my uncle had named me his sole beneficiary. My uncle's estate was valued at $2.1 million. I put the letter down, picked it up, read it again. Then I sat very still, thinking about my uncle. His quiet voice. The last time I saw him in 2015, when he gripped my shoulder at the door and said, "You're a good man, Alan. I want you to know I see that." I wept for a few minutes. For my uncle, for the years I hadn't visited. Then I called my attorney. I want to say I was surprised by how fast my wife, now my ex-wife, moved. I wasn't. A mutual acquaintance heard about my inheritance through my cousin at a birthday dinner, mentioned it at her book club. And within 2 days it had traveled the entire social circle that my wife had always been better at navigating than I was. Owen Strickland, my family law attorney, called me on a Thursday afternoon. "Your wife's attorney filed a motion this morning. She's arguing your inheritance is a marital asset subject to division. Your divorce isn't final yet. Technically, you're still married." The ground shifted under my feet. Can my wife actually do that? I asked. She can file it. Whether it succeeds is a very different question. North Carolina law generally protects inherited property as separate, Owen explained. But the timing of everything mattered enormously. The more clearly we could document the circumstances of my removal from my home, the stronger my position. "I kept the note my wife left with my suitcase," I said. "Handwritten. I dated." Owen went quiet for a long moment. "Alan, do not lose that note." Here is what my wife never accounted for. 6 weeks before my uncle's attorney found me, before my inheritance was anything more than a distant possibility, I had already called Owen Strickland. Not about my inheritance, about a deposit slip. It was a Saturday in late September. I was at my house on Birchwood Drive collecting my winter coats on the agreed retrieval schedule. My wife's coat had fallen from its hanger onto the box I was reaching for. I lifted it to hang it back. Something slipped from my wife's interior coat pocket onto my floor. A deposit slip. Folded in thirds. From a bank I had never heard of. Account name, Diane Whitmore. My wife's maiden name. Deposit amount, $4,200. Date, 14 months ago. Or when my wife was still calling herself my wife. I photographed it on my phone, placed it back exactly as I found it, took my coats, drove back to Pete's house. That night I called Owen. He told me to document everything, say nothing, and let my wife believe she had already won. Now, if you think that deposit slip from my wife's secret account was the worst of it, I need you to stay right here, because we haven't even reached the floor yet. Owen filed a discovery request on a Monday. By Friday, he called me. "There's a home equity line of credit against your house on Birchwood Drive. Filed 16 months ago. Current balance drawn, $63,000. I sat down slowly. "I never signed that," I said. "I know. But your signature appears on the filing." Owen emailed me the scanned document while we were still on the phone. And I opened it and stared at the signature line. I have been signing my name on engineering documents for 28 years. I know the exact backward lean of my capital A. I know the pressure I put into the downstroke of the M in Mercer. I know every detail of my own signature. This had none of those things. "Owen," I said slowly, "I see it too. Someone forged your signature on a loan against your house. $63,000. Taken from the equity in my house. The house I had built with my own hands and my own weekends for 21 years. My wife had borrowed against my house using a forged signature. Owen found it on a Tuesday morning and called before I finished my coffee. A property deed filed with the county records office. A renovated townhouse purchased in the name of Diane Whitmore. My wife's maiden name, unmarried. And at the time of purchase, my wife had been married to me for 29 years. listed as co-investor on my wife's secret property. Craig Bellamy, commercial real estate broker. I didn't know that name. Not from my wife's friends. Not from our church. Not from any corner of the 31 years my wife and I had shared. I typed his name into a search engine. His website appeared immediately. Mid-40s, confident smile, dark hair going silver at the temples. Then I looked at the date on my wife's secret property deed, 18 months before my layoff. I put my phone face down on Pete's table, finished my coffee, called Owen, told him to pull everything connected to that man's name and my wife's maiden name. "How far back?" Owen asked. "As far as the records go," I said. Owen's investigator found the connection in 4 days. A church investment seminar. 4 years ago. This man had been a guest speaker. His topic, investment property as a retirement asset. My wife had attended. My wife's name was on the sign-in sheet. 4 years ago. While I was still reporting to work every morning. While my wife and I were still eating dinner together most nights. While my wife still kissed me goodbye at my front door. I sat with that fact and let it rearrange everything I thought I knew. My wife's hidden account. My wife's secret rental property built with money stolen from my home's equity. The forged loan against my house. The suitcase my wife packed in my hallway. The word useless delivered to my face without a flinch. None of this was my wife falling apart under financial pressure. This was my wife's exit strategy. Quietly built over 4 years, so while I was right there in my own house, trusting her completely. Owen called on a Thursday morning with a tone I hadn't heard before. "Sit down for this one, Alan." My wife's financial records from Discovery included her personal email account. Inside, Owen found a folder my wife had labeled Household Notes. 40 emails my wife had written to herself. Records of transfers and payments made over 2 years. Several of those transfers had gone to my son, 29 years old, living in Raleigh, going through his own difficult stretch financially. "How much total?" I asked. 17 transfers over 22 months, approximately $8,000. "My wife was helping my son with rent," I said. "Alan," Owen's voice went careful. "Your wife labeled every single transfer. She wrote, alignment payment, NM, I for each one." The room went completely quiet. Alignment payment. My wife had been using my own money from my marital account, to purchase my son's cooperation during our legal proceedings. My son didn't know what he was part of. My son took the transfers because he needed help, and because his mother told him that's what it was. But my wife recorded every single one as a transaction. Not help. A payment. My wife had bought my son's silence with my own money. Owen retained a forensic document examiner out of Charlotte. 20 years of court-recognized work. Over 200 cases. Her findings never successfully challenged. She spent 3 days comparing the HELOC signature against 12 verified samples of my authentic signature from my engineering contracts, my county permit applications, and my mortgage documents. On her conclusion, the signature was not produced by Alan Mercer. It is a deliberate forgery. Owen filed the forensic report with the court on Monday. By Wednesday, Owen had traced the notary who processed the forged loan against my house, and my investigator found that this same notary had provided services to my wife's co-investor on 3 previous transactions over 4 years. That relationship was not incidental. The notary complaint was filed with the North Carolina Secretary of State's office the same week. My investigator found one more thing, a small entry buried in the county court index, a preliminary asset inventory submitted before a formal divorce proceeding. 2 names on that worksheet, my wife's maiden name and my wife's co-investor. So they had walked into a family law office together 22 months before I lost my job and asked an attorney to assess the most favorable conditions under which my wife could leave our marriage and protect as many assets as possible. While I was still driving to work every morning, eating at my kitchen table, assuming my wife and I were two people navigating a normal long marriage, my wife and this man were sitting across from a lawyer, mapping the cleanest way out. My layoff wasn't the reason my marriage ended. My layoff was the story they had been waiting for. The cover that would make everything look like my failure, instead of my wife's plan. I had spent 11 months blaming myself for a collapse that had been engineered around me years before it happened. My uncle's attorney needed original letters my uncle had written me over the years, kept in a wooden box in the basement of my house on Birchwood Drive. I texted my wife at 9 in the evening, short and factual. I needed to come by Thursday morning at 8 to retrieve documents for my estate attorney. I'd be in and out in 20 minutes. My wife read it, didn't respond. I showed up anyway. I had every legal right. My house was still jointly owned. I drove to my house on Birchwood Drive on a cool October morning. The maple tree in my front yard was turning orange gold, the one I planted for my wife in 2003. I got out, walked up my stone path, climbed my 3 porch steps, and knocked on the door of my own house. The door opened. It wasn't my wife. He was maybe 45. Dark hair, uncombed, wearing only gray gym shorts, barefoot on my hardwood floor. The look of a man completely at home in my house. Not visiting, not passing through, living there. He looked at me with mild surprise, then his expression settled into something practiced and deliberate. "Can I help you?" he said, standing in my doorway. "In my house." I looked past his shoulder at my hallway, the one I repainted in 2018. At my coat hook I installed in 2009, where his jacket was hanging. At the ceramic dish my mother had made in her pottery class in 1992. The dish that had sat on my entry table for 31 years, where his keys were sitting. His keys, in my mother's dish, on my entry table, in my house. Please subscribe to this channel, because I need you to stay with me for what comes next. I know you think you understand the full picture of what my wife had done. You don't. Not yet. I wish I was exaggerating. I am not exaggerating even slightly. I did not raise my voice. I did not step inside. I am a structural engineer. You don't apply force to a compromised joint. You document the failure. You note it. You build accordingly. Tell my wife, I said quietly, that her attorney will be hearing from mine this morning. I turned around, walked back down my stone path, got in my car, sat in my driver's seat for 4 minutes without starting my engine. I looked at my maple tree, the one I planted for my wife 20 years ago, and I let myself feel every single stone of what had just happened. Then I started my car and called my attorney. My wife's co-investor called me that same afternoon. Something made me answer. "I think we need to talk," he said. His voice was controlled but only just, rattled underneath. "Say, I don't believe we do," I said. "There might be a way to simplify things for everyone. A private settlement." "I'm going to stop you right there. This call is being recorded. You've made unsolicited contact with me during active litigation in which you are a named party. I strongly recommend you stop talking and call your own attorney." Silence. He started to speak again. "Have a good evening," I said. I hung up. My hands were completely steady. I called my attorney immediately and sent him the recording from my phone. "He just handed us a harassment entry," my attorney said, "and he confirmed his involvement in the litigation, voluntarily, on record, without counsel present. He just made your case significantly stronger." My attorney laid the full picture out on a whiteboard on a Thursday morning in November. 3 colors, a left to right, Every verified fact in sequence. 4 years ago, my wife meets her co-investor at a church seminar. Contact begins. 3 years and 8 months ago. First transfer from my marital account to my wife's private account in her maiden name. 2 years and 10 months ago. My wife and her co-investor consult a family law attorney together about exit conditions from my marriage. 2 years and 4 months ago. My wife's secret townhouse purchased. Her co-investor listed on my wife's property deed. 18 months ago. Forged loan filed against my house. $63,000 drawn from my home's equity. 14 months ago. My firm restructures. I am laid off. 8 months ago. My wife packs my suitcase. My wife hands me a note. My wife removes me from my own home. Present. My uncle's inheritance arrives. My wife files a motion to claim my inheritance. 7 years. Patient. Methodical. Running quietly inside my marriage while I believed every single day that my marriage was real. Your wife was always going to lose, my attorney said. She just doesn't know it yet. I called my son on a Sunday evening. I need you to listen without saying anything for a few minutes, I told my son. There's something you need to know, and I want you to hear it from me first. I told my son about my wife's alignment payments. I read my wife's own label directly from my attorney's notes, alignment payment, NM, for each of the 17 transfers my wife had made to my son using my money. The silence on my son's end went very long. She said it was rent money, my son finally said. His voice had gone flat and young-sounding. Oh, she said she just wanted to help me. I know, and I believe you believed her. She used your money to… My son stopped, started again. Dad, I'm sorry. I know you are, and this does not change anything between you and me. You understand that? My son exhaled, long and ragged. We talked for another 20 minutes about my son's favorite fishing trip we took together in 2017. About the Saturday afternoon, my son learned to read a blueprint in my garage. Things that were real and still ours. Buncombe County Courthouse. A gray December morning. I know that building well. I designed the structural reinforcement for its East Wing Annex in 2009. I sat at my attorney's table and felt, for the first time in 18 months, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And my wife sat across the room with her attorney. A man in an expensive suit, wearing the expression of someone beginning to realize the case he'd agreed to take was not the case he'd been sold. My attorney presented each piece in order. My inheritance as protected separate property. The forged loan against my house. My wife's full timeline. The church seminar. My wife's private account. My wife's family law consultation with her co-investor before my layoff. My wife's alignment payments to my son. Every document. Every layer. As we filed out, I passed close enough to see my wife's notepad on her table. 3 words. My wife's handwriting. An unfinished sentence. How did he… My wife's notary cooperated 11 days after the complaint was filed. He gave a full statement. My wife's co-investor had approached him about notarizing property transfers, cash payments, private meetings, no office records. He had done it twice before, and then for the forged loan against my house. My wife's co-investor told him my signature would need to be handled, that it was just a formality. The husband was aware. The notary processed the forgery against my house. He knew. Choosing not to look is its own kind of knowing. My attorney submitted the full statement. My wife's co-investor retained a criminal defense attorney 2 days later. Then my attorney found one final layer. My wife's co-investor had borrowed $85,000 against my wife's secret townhouse, without my wife's knowledge, without my wife's signature. He had been in default for 4 months. See, a lender had already filed a lien against my wife's own property. The clean start my wife had planned, her co-investor had been quietly borrowing against it behind my wife's back. My wife found out at the exact same moment we did, through the same subpoena records. Your wife just found out the man she left you for borrowed against everything they built together and is facing criminal exposure, my attorney said. He was running his own scheme inside your wife's scheme. My wife trusted him, I said. She did, my attorney said. It was the one piece of this story I almost felt sorry for my wife about. Almost. My uncle's estate finalized in Charleston. I signed the documents in a conference room overlooking the harbor and became, fully and legally, the person my uncle had spent 40 years building something for. I stood at the window and looked at my uncle's harbor. My uncle had told me once that his investment philosophy came from watching the tide. The water doesn't force anything. It rises and fills whatever space is available. You have to respect the patience of that. I hadn't understood what my uncle meant when he said it. I understood it completely now. I called a structural engineering firm in Charleston about a coastal bridge project. I said yes. Then I called my friend Pete. I need a few more weeks in your spare room. Stay as long as you need. Same words as my first night. Some things hold. I didn't sleep much the night before my final hearing. I made coffee at 5 in the morning, sat at Pete's table in the dark, and I took out the handwritten note my wife had left with my suitcase. The note I'd kept in a manila envelope since the morning my wife threw me out of my own house. I unfolded it for the first time since that morning. My wife's handwriting was neat and even. My wife had always been proud of her penmanship. You need to leave today, Alan. You've become useless to this family and I'm done pretending otherwise. I read my wife's words twice. Then I folded the note, put it back in my pocket, and got dressed. Dark navy suit. Bought with the first payment from my new consulting work. I looked in my mirror. 62 years old. Exactly where I was supposed to be. Judge Ruth Ashe ran a precise courtroom. My attorney presented the full case. My inheritance as protected separate property under North Carolina statute. The forged loan against my house. My wife's full timeline. My wife's alignment payments to my son. My wife's secret property deed. Her co-investor's lien. The notary's full statement. Every document entered into the record. My wife's attorney cross-examined. A competent attorney knows when to limit damage rather than compound it. When the submissions were complete, I looked at my wife for the first time that morning. My wife was sitting very still. My wife's hands were folded in her lap. My wife's folder was closed. My wife looked smaller than I remembered, in the way people look when the story they have been telling about themselves has just been publicly replaced by the true one. My wife looked up. My wife and I looked at each other across that courtroom for about 4 seconds. Then I looked away. The ruling arrived 9 business days later. My attorney called at 8:47 and read the key sections. My inheritance ruled fully protected as separate property under North Carolina statute. My wife's motion to claim my inheritance was denied in full. The forged loan against my house ruled fraudulent. The $63,000 reclassified as a debt attributed to my wife's account, pending criminal proceedings. My wife's secret townhouse classified as a marital asset, but its value was already gutted by her co-investor's lender lien, filed without my wife's knowledge. My house on Birchwood Drive. To be sold, proceeds split equally, after the fraudulent loan debt was first deducted from my wife's share. Then my attorney read the judge's final sentence. The court notes the extensive and documented pattern of financial concealment, fraudulent conveyance, and deliberate misrepresentation that characterized the respondent's conduct during the marriage and separation, and has weighted these findings accordingly throughout this determination. weighted accordingly. My wife received less than a third of what my wife had filed the motion expecting to receive. My uncle's inheritance was entirely mine. The fraudulent debt followed my wife. My wife's co-investor faced a separate criminal inquiry. My attorney paused before he hung up. Alan, it was a privilege. I bought my house in late January, a modest craftsman on Elm Ferry Road in Charleston. 2 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, a front porch that caught the morning light from the east and the harbor breeze through the afternoons. 3 blocks from the water. My house needed work. My porch boards were soft at the edges, and I made a list on a yellow legal pad and started with my porch on a Saturday in February. I set the last board at 4 in the afternoon. I stood on my new porch, and it held my weight the way good work always does. Not with drama, not with noise, just quietly, the way a thing holds when it was done right. I went inside my house, made my coffee, came back out and sat on my porch. My son called that Sunday. My son and I talked for an hour about nothing heavy. My son said he might drive down in the spring. I told my son the 2nd bedroom would be ready. My wife did not call. Not after the ruling. Not after my house on Birchwood Drive sold. Not after my wife's co-investor's name appeared in the local news. Some silences carry their own answer. So I sat on my porch on a Tuesday morning in March with my coffee and thought about what it costs a man to be called useless by his own wife, by the person who was supposed to know him better than anyone in the world. I thought about my uncle, who saw something in me when I had stopped seeing it in myself. Here is what I know now, at 62, on my porch, that I built right. My wife's suitcase was not the worst thing that happened to me. It was a door, and I walked through it. What a man truly owns cannot be packed by his wife and left in his hallway. It lives in how he holds himself when it hurts, and in the kind of man he chooses to remain when no one is watching. My wife thought she was throwing out a man who had nothing left. She was wrong about that from the very first morning. Yet if any part of this story stayed with you, if it felt true, please like this video, hit subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in my position? I read every single one. Your thoughts matter to me more than you know.